Right, so I'm here to essentially almost rehearse a talk that I'm doing in about a week's time. It's at that minute there. It's meant to be a half-hour talk, but I'm going to attempt to pad it out into an hour and go into more detail, probably say quite a lot and stutter, so I'm sure that we'll probably fill an hour. So this is about automated testing, but on mobile devices, which is something which we don't do that much of here, but we are looking to do more of. I mean, most of our applications here are web applications or PWAs. And hopefully this works. No, it doesn't work. So, first of all, I'm not a tester. I make a terrible tester because I tend to assume that things work when they often don't. I have developed mobile apps before, but the last application that I developed ended up, well, people went to jail. So it was an application for the courts, I'm really sorry to say, if you ever got, say, a speeding ticket or any kind of driving offence, they probably used my app to sentence you. So, sorry. So I'm here to talk about DevOps, and not necessarily just how you do the testing, but how you actually build all the infrastructure around doing tests at scale on devices. So, at Sainsbury's, we have lots of devices. In my department, they don't really let us near customers that often. So the only device which you might recognise, apart from people who actually work here, is this one here, which is a sign-in book for contractors. That one's on Galactic Tab A's, and all the other devices are TC51s, which we have lots of, and we have a few iPads. So what you'll notice is the majority of our devices, I think about 83%, are Android-based. So, actually, first of all, I meant to say this before the talk. Because this is a talk for an external audience, those of you who work here might know a lot of these figures and facts are kind of true. If you spot anything which has been massively overinflated or is just a blatant lie, then that's because it's for an external audience. We can get away with testing mostly on Android. So we run over 350,000 tests every day. This is one of those figures that's really inflated. I actually came to that figure by looking at the team that was Promcom and looking at the number of tests that they run and then multiply it by the number of teams, and that figure is probably way too high, but it looks like a very impressive figure. Not all of those are UI tests. The vast majority are unit tests and the integration tests, but we do get a lot of value from them. So I guess the most obvious benefit is that there are less bugs. There was a study recently that showed that bugs which are caught in the design phase of an application cost around £100 in people's time to fix. Bugs that are caught in development, i.e. what you would pick up in this testing, cost around £1,000 to fix. If a bug makes it to production, the figure's more like £10,000 on average. The other benefit is it lets us make changes quickly and with confidence. You can often get into a situation where you're kind of playing whack-a-mole almost, where you'll fix a bug and it'll break something else, and everyone's afraid to actually touch the code base. That lets us know that everything's actually working. It also just generally makes everyone feel better, just knowing that everything works, and you can sleep better at night knowing that your software is probably not going to break and fall over, and you won't get a call at 5 in the morning. So this is the process that we tend to go through as we write software. So we a developer actually writes software. it gets committed and reviewed, it then gets built. We then run various tests, such as automated tests, UI tests, and we'll then release it into a test environment. An actual tester will test it, and then do more exploratory testing and trying to actually break things as opposed to checking if things work. If it's all okay, then we will release that version into production. The part of the process I'm talking about here are these two steps. So how we build and automatically test our apps. So, first of all, who knows what a virtual machine is? Good. Who knows what Kubernetes is? I have to do this test because people often don't put their hands up. Who knows what a computer is? Okay, so a lot of you don't put your hands up. Okay, cool. This is a data center. This is somewhere in Ireland. And we have, within one of these servers, we have some virtual machines, which are, for all intents and purposes, like physical machines, except you can fit lots of them in a single server. Within those, we run what's called Kubernetes, which again allows us to fit lots of applications onto a single server. I guess I'll switch to this to you. And the way it works is slightly different, because whilst they are separate machines, they're kind of aware of the OS of the host, so they're not quite as ring-fenced as a virtual machine would be, but you can fit a lot more of them onto the same hardware. So that's what a virtual machine and Kubernetes is. So when you want to test a set of devices, you've got 4 basic options. The simplest, and what for most people will probably do, is a price model where you pay every month. You get a set number of. You can run lots of different phones or tablets, but you can only run so many in parallel. Normally 2. So it's great as far as you can test your application on Galaxy tablets, on iPads, on anything you want. But for what we're trying to do, which is run automated tests at scale, if you can only run 2 devices in parallel at a time, then it takes quite a long time to run lots of tests. So the other option is a pay-as-you-go model, which lets you run as many devices as you want, but you pay per device. So that can often be 14 pence per minute per device, which when you work it out is quite a lot of money. So all these are third parties which have gone to the trouble of creating a platform for you to actually run tests on phones. You can do it yourself. There's obviously, it's a bit more complicated, I'd say fun, and there are different ways of doing it. So using real devices, the initial outlay is quite a lot of money, because you've got to buy a whole set of phones and tablets, but you've got the benefit that you're then running on actual real devices. One of the main reasons why we don't do that, or why we probably wouldn't do that, is that you've got to find somewhere to store them, and it would require a fair amount of maintenance to actually get things running. So the alternative option, which isn't quite as flexible, because you're using innovative devices, is to have a virtual device farm, which still allows you to run lots of tests at the same time, but is much cheaper. So for my paying fractions of a penny, opposed to, I think it was 14 pence for the pay-as-you-go model. So this is the way that we currently do UI testing. before. This is a lie, we don't do it this way. We don't actually do it at all in an automated fashion, but we will quite soon. So this is how we plan to do the UI testing. Our build server fetches the source code and builds the application. It then deploys it onto a test site, and then it runs integration tests and UI tests, and then it runs automation tests, and all of this at this point is true. This is how we currently do stuff. But the issue that we have is we have one virtual machine which has some browsers on it, and we run tests overnight. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to test one application. So what I'd like to do is we have a bit of software called Selenium and Grid, which essentially what that does is the automated test says I'm looking for a web browser. I want it to be Chrome, I want it to be version 70, and the grid goes off and tries to find that browser running on a virtual machine somewhere. And it goes, okay, right, I've got 5 of those, and then the test goes, okay, great, well, I've got 5 tests. So I want to occupy these five Chrome nodes here, and maybe 2 of these Firefox ones, and run a test against this site here, which so we do currently do this, but it's an overnight process, and there's just one of these, so it's much slower. So I thought it'd be quite simple to basically put some Android thing there and do the same kind of thing. So we use the same process, we just make it control some emulators, which it sounds pretty simple. It's not simple. So part of this talk, actually quite a lot of this talk, will be me telling you what not to do. So some of the pitfalls that I found is, because emulators are virtual machines, and you're running them in a virtual machine, you've got a virtual machine, which, as well as being a bit hard to get your head around, doesn't work particularly well. It's quite finicky to actually set up. And then the other thing is you've got virtual network adapters, which again become virtual network adapters, which don't work. There's no way around that. So I thought it'd be easy. I actually agreed to do this talk in a week's time, thinking it'd be easy. Turns out it's not very easy at all. So what the process is now is we get the source code, we build the application. That application is then compiled down into a APK file, which is an app for an Android phone. We then go through the same process. We run all our unit tests and integration tests. If we need to, we scale up the number of virtual machines which can actually do that testing. And then we run our automation tests, which does a similar kind of thing, except opposed to talking to a set of web browsers, we have some virtual machines here which contain Appium, which I'll go into in a second, and some emulated phones. And we can have as many of the virtual machines as we want. So that's what I've created, or tried to create. I'm going to show you 1.5 demos, because what I was going to do broke last night. But I've got another demo, which is I'll basically walk you through the process of creating some tests. So, demo time. This will probably go really, really wrong, but that's why I'm doing it now, so that hopefully it doesn't go wrong in a week's time. First of all, any questions? Nope. No questions at all? Okay. Right. Also, it's occurred to me that I'm going to have to copy and paste a password into a virtual machine on a TV, so I might probably unplug my screen for a second. So, the way this... What's my screen doing? Start. Right, so this is Selenium Grid. Oh, no, it's not. This is the perfect opportunity for you to put in that password. 1 second. So, has anyone here... Oh, here on the screen. Has anyone here done any automated testing before? Show of hands? I know there's more than that. Okay, yeah. So, was that using web browsers in Selenium, or has anyone done any application, any mobile app testing at all? I know Cody has. Oh,
2 days.
okay. Cool. Well, at this point, I'm kind of basically killing time while I'm trying to find what was the copy and paste the password. So, right. So, let's present my screen. This is Selenium Grid. So what this does is it allows you to talk to different test agents. So we've got a few instances of Firefox and Chrome here. Those are running in Kubernetes, which I mentioned earlier, which means that we can fit lots of them on the same virtual machine in a very kind of compact way. So again, all this is scalable. So if we wanted to conduct lots of tests, we could scale that up, and it would cost a little bit more money, but we gain the ability to run lots of tests very quickly. And then you've got all of these, and these are, well, each box is a virtual machine that's running in the cloud, and then on that box there are a bunch of Android phones which are emulated. And Selenium Grid allows you to essentially talk to the grid using tests, and the grid will find you the correct type of device, be it a browser or a phone, to actually run those tests on. So the way this looks from an infrastructure point of view is if I go to here, we have what's called a scale set, which is a collection of virtual machines which you can scale up and down. You can do this in code as well. So as part of your build process, you can say, I'm going to be running lots of tests, therefore I want to turn this all the way up to 100, which is 300 devices. Is Sue Collins in the audience, by the way? Because she will kill me. I won't press save on that. So you could scale it up to 800 devices, but it would cost you a bit of money. So this scale set includes, in this case, 10 virtual machines, which are all running here. And the virtual machine looks a bit like this. So we have here 3 phones, 6 phones, and they're running this Appium client here, which allows Selenium Grid to communicate with these phones. And you can talk to Appium in Selenium, which means that you can almost treat a phone like a web browser. Which to me seems like a really weird concept. When you think about it, most modern applications on phones can do the same kind of stuff that a web browser can do. So you've got a camera, you've got an accelerometer, all those things that you can do in a web browser, you can also do on the phone. So it simplifies testing quite a lot, because you can take your testers who are used to writing test scripts for web applications, and you can test mobile applications in the same kind of way. There's a few caveats there, and it's a bit tricky to get set up, but it's the same ecosystem. Now this is the point of the demo where I say, this all works, I've got phones here, they do stuff, but as I said, I managed to break it. So I'll go into how I broke it and why it's such a nightmare to set this up. But what I will show you instead is how to write some test scripts, which going by the number of hands shown earlier, a lot of people here maybe aren't that familiar with how to write automated tests, so it might be quite a good thing to do. So, I really hope this works. So here are a bunch of UI tests for a really simple application, which is a Sainsbury's themed calculator. So it's a calculator that's got the same scores. And it's quite a good thing to actually demonstrate testing on because it's got some very clear rules, which is maths, essentially. So I'm hoping this still runs because I realised I was going to have to do this other demo about 10 minutes before I got on stage. But I'll show you what the tests look like. Right, so this is the kind of thing which a test might look. So here we're doing our tests in JavaScript using a framework called Mocha. What I've found is there are various different client libraries for Appium, and the JavaScript one is by far the easiest to use. The other ones, well, the support generally is a little bit broken and flaky, but the JavaScript one seems quite the most solid of all the libraries. So also is Thomas Hunter in the audience. Thank you, Tom, because I basically ripped off his example of how to do a UI test and made a calculator, so all this really came from him. So what we do here is we describe what we're going to be testing. So first of all, can everyone see this, by the way? Or is that back? No. Better? Yeah? Good more. That's the problem of having these new HTTPs that we've got. So, we describe what we're going to test. So this is when you click a number on the calculator, what we expect it to do. We expect it to appear on the display. So before we actually run the test, we need to get what's called the driver, which allows us to talk to the phone application via the grid. And so we call this get driver, which in turn goes off and reads this file called the capabilities, and this says what kind of device you'd like. So in this case, I'm targeting a specific device, but you could just say I want an Android phone. It has to be Android 8.1, and it has to have this application here installed on the phone. If it was a browser, then you could say I want Chrome, and I want the version of Chrome, and so on, and it will try to find you that device. If it can't find it, then obviously it won't run the test. So we get this driver, which then connects us to a phone. I've got this press buttons method, which I've not seen this code in about a month, so I'm because I realised that the demo wasn't going to work about 10 minutes before I went on stage, so I'm hoping there's no comments or swear words in here. So this press button method essentially says, go to the driver, find the element by its ID, which in this case is BTN num 7 for 7. And then if it's running a demo, then wait a little bit so you can actually see what it's doing, because otherwise it would be lightning fast and you wouldn't see anything. And then it will click the button here, so basically you just press the button. So after you've done that and you've pressed number 1, then we say so this is like the setup steps. This is what happens beforehand. This is what happens during. So this is after I've pressed 1, it shows on the display. So there's another area of the screen called the sum, and we get the text of that, and that text should equal 1 in this case. And then after all that's finished, we disconnect from the phone, which is this driver up quick. And there's some of these tests which do the same thing. So for instance, that's not a valid sum to enter. It should just show 43.45, and they all do the same kind of thing. So I really wish I could actually demo this part of the talk, but like I said, it isn't working. So any more questions? No? Yes.
I use Selenium and the Selenium driver, but when I call Selenium and I say get browser, it just gets the local browser. So this grid, is this an application you have to install? Or?
Yes, so essentially you can, I think that works. So yeah, so by default Selenium will run as, Selenium itself is a server. So if you run Selenium on your machine, then you're saying any client that connects can control web browsers on my machine. What we're doing here basically is running Selenium or Appium on a different server. So on a different machine, to say that Selenium can control browsers on that machine instead. So you could just, if you wanted to just test against one server, you could run Selenium on that server and then point your local machine to that server, and that would work. Where Selenium Grid gets involved is when you've got more than one, and they may run a different set of browsers or different versions, or maybe phones. And that's where, so that takes care of matching to say, I'm going to route this request to this server here because that has Chrome on it, or this one here because that's got an Android phone. So the answer to the question is yes. If you install Selenium Grid and Selenium server on a different machine or machines, then you can set it up to testing in parallel. If you, in the break, I'll have a chat with you if you want, and I'll show you how it works. And so yeah, any more questions? Yes.
All this can apply to iOS as well if you want to.
Yes. So the reason why I've not targeted iOS in the presentation, I said that most of our devices are Android, which is true, but we do test it on iOS, as you know. The reason why I've said that in the presentation is because you can do this on iOS. However, iOS virtual phones, it's called a simulator, only run on macOS, and you do get cloud providers which will give you macOS virtual machines, but it's none of the ones that we use. So they're quite specialist. But you can set this exact same thing up in a different cloud to test iPhone apps as well. And it works in the same kind of way. You just have to have a different cloud provider.
What sort of tests have you found failed in the real life devices but passed through all the emulations?
I think timing is, with all these kind of things, timing is quite a big thing. So with device tests, I've not got that much experience. With web application tests, again, it's all around timing. So often the test will be usually too fast for the web app, and you have to actually make it wait to do stuff. So you end up having to put artificial delays. You have to put artificial delays in the test, which is why tests can often take, say, half an hour to actually complete a full suite of tests. So yeah, my take on all this, my experience is more from a DevOps infrastructure point of view. I can point you at a tester who can tell you all about that. He's sat right behind you. But yeah, so from what I know about it, it's mostly around timing. But all the automated tests that we run are more to they're not to find bugs. They're to check things to work. They're testing the happy path of the application, opposed to actually trying to break things. So, any more questions or? Hello? Cool. Oh yes. Yeah.
I've been there for the last second.
All right.
So is the limitation of this kind of testing more to do just functional, like you said, the happy path, making sure when I hit it, the button produces the right effect? So
Yes.
performance testing and things like that.
So performance testing, the issue you'd have with going down this route of performance testing is, so these virtual machines cost us at a base rate about 15 pence an hour. To get enough scale to actually really hammer an application, you end up having to use quite a lot of virtual machines, so it'd be quite expensive. So when it's a application on, when it's a phone application, performance testing is not really that much of a big deal because that application will only have a single user, person on the phone. When it's a website, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So we would normally do performance testing using applications that don't actually have an interface. They don't go and click buttons. They do what the web application does in the background. They call endpoints. They send requests, they do that kind of stuff very, very quickly, and that's without actually having to drive a interface, which makes it much faster. So we do stuff like Gatling or JMeter. That's it, yeah. That's almost like a different type of testing. So yeah, sorry the demo is half a demo, but hopefully I've gave you a rough overview of what I was trying to get working. And thanks.
2 points to make before I start my talk. The first one is it's very developer focused. It's all sitting within an IDE. So I'm not going to be offended if you feel that it's not for you and you leave. Now that you've been fed, it's fine. Luke doesn't include you. And the second one is, although it looks like I have slides, there's only 3 of them. The rest of it's all in Visual Studio. So if you want to actually see what's going on, I suggest you fill up the seats in the front. So it's worth moving. The screens are big, but it's not that big. Okay, cool. Just a quick introduction for those that don't know who I am. Gareth Freeman. I'm the Chief Engineer of Retail Logistics at Sainsbury's. Just a quick question. I know from Joe's talk how effective this is, but who's using Visual Studio 2019? Oh, okay. So that's good. So who's using Visual Studio but not 2019? Okay, so just kind of give a bit of background to why I'm doing the talk. Firstly, I went to Build last month. I got the opportunity, it was really good. But off the back of that, I think Joe was quite keen for me to do a talk first thing when I got back. There were a lot of really interesting topics there, but I just haven't really had time to put through, get together some presentations, and there's definitely some cool stuff that I want to talk about at Crafty Coders in the future, but it just requires a little bit more prep. But for the Microsoft developers that haven't looked at the Build videos that are available online, it's definitely worth doing. There's some really good talks there. But I thought, what can I talk about that I got from Build that you can't just watch online? And it's essentially, I've been using Visual Studio for a while. I've noticed there's been some improvements since Visual Studio 2017. But it's one of those things where you're in the middle of talks being done and people kind of just breeze over some feature or something that's in Visual Studio 2019 that I wasn't quite aware of, so I just kind of made those notes, and I thought, it would probably be worth just going through kind of some tips and tricks that I saw guys doing in presentations that I wasn't aware of that I think can help productivity. Also a disclaimer, I've been using ReSharper pretty much my entire development career in Visual Studio, and I consciously made the decision not to use it when I started using Visual Studio 2019, just to see kind of where they were with it. And I know a lot of the functionality that they've done is kind of to bridge that gap in terms of productivity, but I'm still struggling a little bit to kind of match that productivity, and you'll see I'm not 100% familiar with the stuff that you get out of the box, but there's some cool stuff that even if you do have a ReSharper background, there's some things in Visual Studio 2019 that actually leverages the shortcuts and some of the stuff that's in ReSharper that I think people might not necessarily be aware of. Who has actually gone through the videos from Build as well? No one. So one quickly, just to show you, that's my resources slide, which I'll share again at the end, and that's my thank you slide. So there's no more slides. I wasn't joking about the slides. One thing that was probably worth noting from Build, it's something to think about, is the .NET roadmap. So specifically the .NET Core roadmap, which they kind of went through at Build. One thing that was quite interesting is the fact that .NET Core 3.1 is the last .NET Core. So from 2020, it's a way off, but it's something to start thinking about. .NET 5 is going to be the .NET. So they're essentially killing framework. So finally, they're getting rid of web forms support, and I will open a bottle of champagne when that happens, because I had to deal with that for the first 2-3 years of my career. But yeah, so it's just something to be aware of. .NET Core essentially has been announced as the future of .NET. The fact that it is essentially becoming the base version of .NET is quite interesting, and then from then they're going to have major release cycles every year, which is something as being a .NET developer has been quite difficult to deal with, is the cadence of releases from Microsoft have always been particularly bad. Cool. Yeah, so let's get started with Visual Studio. Actually, I'll start from the beginning. So one major improvement, which I'm not going to spend much time on, is the start window. Essentially, they've done a lot of work here to make life simpler, but again, this is not something I ever did. We'll start a new project, we'll go through this, but for the guys that want to get set up with anything new with specifically Azure, and they've done a lot of work around their GitHub integration since they now own GitHub, which was also a very common theme at Build. I essentially think that GitHub is the future source control for Microsoft, so DevOps Git, potentially. There was essentially nothing spoken about it. Everything was GitHub focused, everything was integration with GitHub. But yeah, they've done a lot of work here around the startup, but again, I'm not going to bother with that too much because it doesn't really improve efficiency, which is the subject of the talk. So the first major big feature, and I assume anyone that's using Visual Studio 2019 will probably leverage this quite a bit, but is the global search. So the global search now that's been built in to Visual Studio 2019 is a massive productivity increase. Essentially, I use it when I'm looking for other shortcuts, and this is coming from ReSharper not knowing shortcuts. You can just Control-Q, you can search things like, it's also got my recent, you can see I changed the font to try and make it a little bit more readable. It's probably worth noting, like, how readable is that? Is everyone okay with the size of that at the moment? I think it's the best I can really get at the moment. But yeah, so you can search in here, you can actually search for essentially anything across settings, across the general development IDE shortcuts, and the great benefit of this is it highlights it highlights what the shortcut keys are. So as you're using this more, I find that's how you kind of discover shortcuts. So you kind of pay attention to just kind of those actions, and you can pick up the shortcuts like that. Because I think generally when I see developers using IDEs, and it was actually one of the topics in my previous talk, if you were here, about 3 steps to becoming a better developer, was learning to use your tools more efficiently. And I think this quick search that they've added is actually quite a good step in terms of learning the shortcuts, learning what the capabilities of your IDE are. And then I guess also the first thing to kind of point out, it's not really that apparent, just because I'm trying to squash this down onto the screen, but they've done a lot around the UI. So the guys that are using any previous version of Visual Studio, again, it's not particularly apparent, but you'll notice when you start this up, there's a lot more space, and they've kind of done that by removing clutter. They've made essentially the task area smaller, but it actually does make a big difference. It's just the fact that you've got more real estate for code, and besides the UI update, there's also massive performance improvements, just in terms of general responsiveness, things like that. So I've noticed it's just a better experience. It's not a major talking point, but it's worth doing the upgrade just for that. If you've kind of been holding it off and you say, well, you know, there's not been any big announcements, there's nothing specific about it, but just the UI updates and the refresh, that global search, and the fact that it's slightly faster is a worthwhile doing it. Especially though if you're a Xamarin developer, or if you're doing any sort of mobile device development in Visual Studio, they've spent a lot of time increasing the performance there, and it's quite drastic. So there's like claims of 30 to 40% faster, but you know, I wouldn't know, I don't really do it, but there are those claims. Also again, this is something that exists in 2017. I thought it'd be worth mentioning. I'm going to use the global search for this, but if I look at, well wait, that was not where I wanted to go. So if I go to my keyboard shortcuts, this is something that I kind of didn't realize was there, and it's been there for a while, but you can change your Visual Studio to use the ReSharper shortcut keys by default. So if you are a ReSharper developer, and you kind of want to take advantage of some of that stuff, then you can kind of just enable that to use as your default shortcuts kind of layout. So you get like the whole Control-Shift. This is for anyone with JetBrains. The search, the global file search, and you can use the quick searches to find particular classes. JetBrains is a little bit better because it can search within files and methods and things like that. This is essentially file level, but if you're familiar with your code, it's really helpful to know that shortcut. So yeah, the global file search, Control-Shift-T. And then in terms of the work around refactoring, they've done a lot of work in terms of the quick actions. So the menu's gotten a lot better. You can do adjustments, you can push methods up into constructors. There's a lot of stuff that was essentially a little bit hidden before, but now the quick refactors are a lot better around that, so you can often get multiple tasks out of that, but it's in terms of refactoring code, there's a lot there, and I'll do a little bit of a demo later on that area. Another big feature that they've added is this document health. So, see, this is a little bit small, but down here you can see the number of number of errors and warnings, but this is now based off it's real time, so it's not your compile errors or warnings. It's quite interesting. What did I generate here? What have I done? Oh, did that get there? Problem with using code. But so yeah, if I go back to that, here, so I've got no errors and warnings. It's quite interesting. Here it can use I don't know if anyone's seen this code style stuff or anyone's using this code style work, but the coding styles, you can set up all your options. Something that I think this was from VS 2017. It's worth doing is you can generate a editor config that you can then export and add to your code. So by changing all your styles, so this is great for working with the team. Yeah.
Are we going to have those for a team as well? Have those like maybe standardised around so that way everyone's kind of using the same deal and.
It's something about within the Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So well.
I mean, certainly for starting a project, trying to get everyone the same.
So definitely it's worth doing. So it's great for an organisation. So you can generate your code styles. It's nice because it's source controlled. It goes into your repo. So it sits alongside the project. The great thing about the editor config is it's compatible with VS Code as well. So you don't have to use the same editor. Well, you have to use a Microsoft editor. So, but that I think there was some work a while ago to standardize that across multiple IDEs. I don't know where that is at the moment, but yeah.
How does it work across languages?
So you've got your preferences, again, are quite limited around, it's mostly around styling. So it depends on your kind of your styles, your quantifiers. It assumes, I think, a lot in terms of what language it's supporting. I can imagine, if you're starting to use like Python or something, you'd run into issues if you're trying to use the same styles as C#. I don't think they've got anything as advanced as a modifier for file type, which is kind of where you'd want to say if it's a .cs file, use that CS file config. I haven't seen anything like that. It might exist. There's probably extensions to do it, but I haven't seen it. But yeah, so going back to the document health, so there's a lot of work here around having real-time health. So, for example, if I go var r, that's straight away an error. Don't need to compile. It's telling me now that obviously it doesn't know what this it's implicitly typed or non-implicitly typed variable.
It was in 2017 as well.
So yeah, so there's some of these features on 2017, but they've done a lot of work to optimize them. So here you can actually run. This is also quite limited, but they're doing a lot of work in it. You can set up clean code cleanup profile. So this is where I don't think you can do this in 2017, because I can just click a button and it gets rid of it.
I think there is code cleanup as well, maybe not multiple setups.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
It's on the right under the
yeah, so this was a big new feature that they announced for VS 2019. So it probably exists.
Yeah, maybe I 2018 at home and 2017 at work.
Yeah, but I haven't seen it in 2017. But yeah, it doesn't matter. From a productivity perspective, it's quite cool. So like you can see, there's a lot of interesting things, and this will build off your style, off your code styles as well. Also have IntelliCode, which I'll go through in a little bit, that feeds into this as well. So you can see as our code, it will clean up and change, so it's no longer an error, but now it's a warning because I've got a variable that's not used. Again, just run it, gets rid of that. So it is actually quite powerful. If you look through what it supports, so if you look through the profile, sorry. Here, there's all sorts of things around. Well, again, this is apparently a list that they're working to expand, but you can do quite a bit in terms of actual code structure. It's not only like spacing or styling or things like that. So it can actually be in terms of access modifiers, Yeah, don't do that. Don't remove single braces. Sorry. Yeah, so you can do some pretty cool stuff with it, and again, this is something that they seem to be focusing on building quite a bit. But it's nice to have that inline ability to kind of see that health, and it kind of prevents, if you look at any sort of system that a development team's been working on for a while, you get it up and running and you look at the number of warnings once you build it. The whole idea here is that you have zero warning code and you don't really have excuses because you can see those warnings as you type in the code, and you have the tools to potentially clean them up. Yeah, and then, okay, so I mentioned IntelliCode. Has anyone been using IntelliCode? Okay, so IntelliCode is essentially the idea of bringing machine learning to your IntelliSense. So this has been a big kind of draw card for moving across to VS 2019. I haven't used it enough to really feel the value of it, but for guys that rely on IntelliSense a lot, I can imagine this making you a lot more efficient. So the whole idea is it builds up an ML model on your use cases for IntelliSense, and it'll build kind of a profile based on your code. Again, you can actually host these in the cloud and share them, so you can have a model for your team of practices, things like that. So it'll actually suggest best practices. But just straight out of the box, the idea behind it is that it'll try and add context to what you're currently doing and your IntelliSense. So, for example, I've got this method here that's essentially taking in an int and returning a string. So if I start doing something like number, I can go, no, so of course it wouldn't work. Oh no, sorry, yeah. So if I go return number, which I know I'm trying to return a string here, if I push dot, the first thing, all these stars, is it's telling me what the context is of what it should complete. So it knows that I'm trying to return a string, I've got a return there, I'm working with an int, what is the most common thing that I'll be trying to do is that return it as a string. And it's quite interesting some of the stuff that it comes up with. As you use it, it's really actually pretty good. I thought it would be a bit of a gimmicky, they're trying to run this on your code, but at the most point, the method that you're trying to do or whatever is within the context straight away. So yeah, I find it's quite useful. Again, you can use this. I'm going to rely on this global searcher a lot. It really is good. And also, yeah, the global search as well uses machine learning as well, and some levels of AR in terms of where is the model management? In terms of you can actually be pretty hacky with what you're searching for, and it's quite decent in terms of what results come back. But here is essentially the IntelliCode startup, and you can set up your model and you can share it with your team. Haven't tried it, but the concept's quite cool. And it's one of those things that kind of you get it out of the box. It'd be quite interesting to see where this kind of goes, whether we're ever going to get to the point where you're just tagging through development. I think ultimately that's what they want, but we'll see. If everyone's uploading their models and you start kind of leveraging shared models, and you actually start doing that information, which is also something that they were quite keen to establish when they were talking about this at Build, was that none of your code ever gets uploaded to the cloud when they're building up these machine learning models. So obviously they're processing what you're typing, but and your model's being computed on the cloud, but they don't upload your code, which is interesting. So, but yeah, the idea is, it'll make you more efficient just in terms of if you rely on IntelliSense. IntelliSense has never been particularly great because the whole thing with it is that you have to know what's available, because by default, actually I can show you here, I don't know if there's actually a count on this, but okay, this is actually not a particularly bad thing because it's a string, but generally in .NET, if you try to rely on IntelliSense, there's generally hundreds of things that you can choose from, so you kind of have to have an idea of what you're doing. This is a good way to expose those things straight away. One other thing worth noting, so for anyone that uses the community edition of Visual Studio, and this is probably worth mentioning, there is a community version of Visual Studio, so for the guys that don't use it, there's a free version for organizations. I think it's up to 20 users, I could be wrong though, but essentially you can use it for commercial use. It's one of the features that was quite big, I believe in 2017, was the code lens. So here showing the number of references, when changes were made, also exceptions from the last time debugging was run. So this code lens functionality was only in professional and enterprise before. This is now in all editions. So they've said that the code lens are opening it up to all editions, which it's a really useful feature. I think this is also something that I've become, especially in debugging, because it keeps the track of your previous exceptions. I've kind of used this quite a few times and said, well, that's particularly useful. So that's now included. Yeah, okay, so I've kind of gone through some of the improvements to the quick actions. One thing that's I've always used, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily know it exists, is the clipboard ring. So in Visual Studio from early days, you could always copy multiple things to the clipboard. So if I want to copy that text, copy that, and then you can go, instead of Control-V, you go Control-Shift-V, whereas before you could just cycle through the things. They've now added a clipboard ring, so you can just select what you were that was there before. That's extremely helpful. The clipboard ring, for guys that aren't using it, is amazing. The fact that you can just cycle through previous things, because how often do you copy something, you go to paste it and then you realize, oh, I've copied something since then. Control-Shift-V is something that a lot of people don't know exists, to go through previous pastes, but now it's quite nice because they've made it visual. It's useful. Yeah, and then another big thing that they've been driving, and I know some of this stuff kind of came out of Visual Studio 2017, is the Azure DevOps integration. I think we've covered this in the previous Crafty coders a little bit, but I thought I'd just kind of reiterate some of the stuff that you can do inside of the Azure DevOps integration work. So I know our teams are using Azure DevOps, and we've kind of spoken about it quite a bit at Crafty coders. This integration exists, and what's quite interesting, and again going back to the GitHub, is they were talking a lot about extensions now that are written by Microsoft Dev Labs that can now get some of this functionality straight from GitHub. So some of the stuff around pull requests, well actually, yeah, the work around pull requests, which I want to demo, branching all of that, the work item stuff, obviously won't be there, but yeah, there's quite a bit of features that they've driven up in extensions. So if you are using GitHub, it's worth looking at extensions for the integration. Again, this is not something that I use a lot. You know, I prefer to do everything by the command line when it comes to Git, just because that's where I'm comfortable. But for teams that are using Azure DevOps that might not feel particularly comfortable with Git, the work that they've done in the GUI has been quite, I mean, they've put a lot of effort into this, and I think there's a lot of features now which are quite decent. So the one thing which I believe exists in 2017 is the ability to create work items directly from Visual Studio. So if you're working on a piece of code and you need to create a bug because you picked up something like the fact that the calculate meaning value is completely meaningless, you can just create the work item from here and do the assignment. But what's quite cool for bigger teams that are using DevOps is I can now say assign to me. So you can have a list of your work items open for the sprint, and you can assign them as you're picking them up. So depending on how granular your work items are, and, you know, the number of members in your team, that's actually really useful to be able to pick up those sort of things. Another piece that I know is new in Visual Studio 2019 is the ability to do code reviews. So one of my big bugbears with Azure DevOps is I find the code reviews and the pull requests process isn't particularly great. I find reading through the code, the way it separates the files, adding comments isn't particularly mature. The ability to now do it in inside Visual Studio, to me is a it's a massive improvement to process, and I'm probably going to start looking at doing all my PRs through this going forward just to give it a try, because I think it's great to be able to go through the code, and just to go through the process. I'm just going to actually explain, which I probably should have done at the start, what the solution is, and just give a little bit of context. So all the solution is a simple web app, so a simple web API that's using properties, that's got one controller. All this controller does is essentially ask you for a number, and if you give it a number, it will tell you how meaningful that number is. We've seen the method for giving you how meaningful a number is at the moment now. If it's greater than 1, it's very meaningful, and otherwise it's not very meaningful. Completely meaningless demo. I just thought of something particularly simple, but I know that one of the developers has taken this meaningless demo and wanted to make it kind of more meaningful by making this method actually do something which makes sense. So I know that that work is being done and it's been pushed and there's a PR open. So if I wanted to open that PR and have a look, you can now from the Team Explorer view your pull requests. This developer was me, which is a bit strange because I'm reviewing my own code, don't ever do that. But I can click on the pull request, I can see the details of the pull request, the description, what was done. What's really cool is I can check out the code. Before I do that, again, making changes while so I can go to my pull request. Should be able to check out the code. Okay, so code will be checked out, loading the projects. From here, I can see what they've done. They've essentially made changes to the meaningful number. And looking at this code, I think it's quite interesting. They've got obviously the meaning of life, very small, and they're just returning the meaning of life divided by that number, and that's how meaningful the number is. What's really good is that squashed. They've added the unit tests as well. So I think these unit tests look okay. I know they've written the unit tests, but you know, can I run the unit test? So you can run the unit test as part of your PR, which I think is extremely useful. So you can actually check out the code, run the code, which is generally what I see developers do anyway, and what I do in a lot of cases is if I'm reviewing code, I'll check out the code and work alongside the review and the code at the same time. But yeah, so I can run the test. From here, again, you can add comments, you can like things as well, because bring social media to your code review. Don't know why they've done that, but yeah, you can add comments, all these comments as well. If I add a comment, you can also do markdown. You can add emoticons if you want. This looks cool. You can add that comment for the developers that are using Azure DevOps. So look if this actually refreshes, but the comments will come through here. They can respond to the comments and it will feed back. Another feature which is quite useful, again, this is something that has existed before, but they've done a lot of work in it, is the live share, which I'm going to get my lovely assistant to help me demo. So from Visual Studio now you can start a live share session. Essentially copies the link to your clipboard, and anyone that's really fast can join my live share.
My laptop's just being really quick starting up.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I can just kind of talk through the idea of live share. So live share is now a tool that they've built in Visual Studio and VS Code to be able to work collaboratively over a single code base. As we'll show in the demo, it's not screen sharing, which is what it looks like at first. But what it does is it actually takes a copy of the code and it will copy it across to the people that join the live share, and it allows them to navigate the code and edit the code on their side, and it becomes a collaborative environment the same way if you're editing any sort of online document. So, a tiny screen. It's fine because you'll see what Will's doing on my screen. And part of the work that you can do with the live shares, you can also make it read-only. So if you're taking a team through code, if you've got teams that work remotely as well, you can kind of use this as a presentation tool. It's nice because you can allow them to explore through the code while you're talking. So you can show the focus of what you're working on. And so Will's now got the code up and running on his machine. He can get the whole project and solution structure, and he can then look at different areas of the code from his machine. I've also got some tools there. You can start conversations. You can focus participants, which I think is quite funny. But essentially, we'll send Will a message telling him to look at the screen that I'm looking at, because I know he's gone off and started looking at other areas of the code that he's more interested in. You can share your terminal, which is really great for support. So if you're working on something and you need a developer to come help you with something, it often requires terminal interaction, especially if you're working with something like Docker or Kubernetes, and the developers are battling on their machine to get the infrastructure up and running. That's something where you call Joe, ask him to run a terminal. Don't expose the terminal for too long if Joe's on the machine though, so you have to keep an eye on what he's doing. So like in an example like this, I can get Will to kind of come and help me look at this review because I've got some questions, and I want to say, well, Will has all the test cases, for example, being covered, and he might take a look at the method that's been used, which I'll show on the screen here. But can you actually request focus for me?
Well, I can't type in this file. I think you must have blocked that. So if I go here.
Oh, I think I know why. Sorry, I know why you can't type. It's because we're busy doing the code review together, so we can't hit the code. Let's just exit code review. Go back to the code. There we go. So now you should be able to start.
Nope.
No, brilliant. That's interesting.
Type in this file.
Okay, well we can type in that file. Wouldn't be a live code if something didn't go wrong. I don't know if the only thing that went wrong, but yeah. So so you can have multiple people in the team typing, can help out with code. Really, really useful, I think, if used in the correct way. Perfect for peer programming, but it's really great. So if you have someone off site that knows a particular area of code well, instead of trying to do screen sharing and typing or getting in to check out the code, So I could be running, essentially .NET Core 3. Will doesn't even have that installed on his machine. He could actually connect to this live share from VS Code without having Visual Studio on his machine and be able to join the session and kind of go through it. So, but by being able to write the code on my machine, I can execute it. We can go through that process. Doesn't need to have any of the frameworks installed. Doesn't need to have any dependencies set up on his machine, which is great for collaboration because often, you want to get someone in the team to check out some code and help out with something remotely. They come back half an hour later saying, I'm still trying to get this thing set up. So this is a great way to get around that. That's kind of what I wanted to show, but it's quite good. Yeah. So can you kick him out? Yeah, I can kick him out.
Can I kick you?
That would be amazing. But yeah, we'll keep them out. So it's quite cool. I think they're putting a lot of effort into this, so I still think it's quite early days. But it does seem to be something that they see as a key part of the IDE going forward, is to have that collaboration built into it. There isn't really too much else to cover. One other thing which I thought was quite interesting that would have helped in the past, it would especially help if I was running ReSharper, because anyone that knows if you're running ReSharper, the bigger your solution, the slower your computer is going to run. It is a bit of a beast if you're running the live code analytics. So what I've actually done in the past is created new solutions that don't contain all the projects, especially if you've got a project that has a lot of files. So like a front-end project, and you're running ReSharper, it can end up being really slow startup process. So, the ability to unload and load projects, always been in Visual Studio, it's fine. So you can unload projects, but what's really cool now is you can actually save this as a solution filter. So you can create filters for your solution. So if you create it as a solution filter, if you add other projects to the solution, it's not going to go and make that solution out of date. So the way of getting around this in the past is having multiple solutions, but that's a nightmare to administer, especially if, I guess there's less sitting in the solution file nowadays with .NET Core, so in the past it would have been more of a problem, but still, having kind of all your setup, your configuration, whatever sits in the solution file, you don't want to duplicate that, so having these filters is particularly useful if you have large solutions that have multiple projects. Just another thing to kind of speed up the process. I think there was some other stuff to configure, to cover, but I can't really remember it at this point. But I think that was kind of just a bit of a whirlwind tour of notes that I made in other talks that I thought was useful. So again, if you're using Visual Studio 2017, you might as well upgrade. There's nothing massive. I think previous versions of Visual Studio have always had bigger announcements, bigger releases. I think their core focus has been in other areas. Again, I'm probably going to sit without ReSharper for a bit longer and see how it goes. But yeah, I hope some of that stuff at least was helpful. That's it for me. So any specific questions? I don't know quite what you're going to question me on, but any questions?
When you you checked out the pull request?
Yes.
That wasn't checking out the branch, that was checking out the pull request.
Yeah. Well, yes. So that's why you can't make code changes. You can check out the branch. I think there was another option there to check out that specific branch. So if you did pick up anything that you wanted to change.
But yeah, normally I wouldn't want to check out someone else's branch. Because it's normally painful to get loads of branches. So once you pull the pull request, you're done with it, it's just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to be able to do that, so the thing that's interesting there is you can look at the code without putting the pull request. The only reason that I clicked pull that change set was so I could run the test, so I could actually execute the code. You can still view the code without having to do that. So you don't actually need to pull their branch, you can view their code. One thing to note is that pull request support is an extension at the moment. So it's the pull request, it's in the marketplace. Pull request for Visual Studio, it's written by Microsoft. the allow guys, but yeah, it is an extension that you have to add, and it'll pull it into the other Azure DevOps integration. But yeah, I don't know how other people find the Azure DevOps code review process, but for the guys that are doing it, I think there's a lot better tooling out there. I think the ability to be able to see the code in the IDE using your current settings is really, really helpful. Even using other code review software that I've done in the past, like Upsource, I find the comments is something area that they can probably work on a bit more. There's some interesting things you can do around snippets, which you can do in Azure DevOps, and they've kind of been building on that quietly in the background to do linking, but and to be able to add code snippets to pull requests as comments. But there's a lot of work to be done in being able to link code to other areas, which I think is not quite there yet for the pull request process. So that's where you want to comment on a piece of code and mention something else. So that's where something like Upsource was really good, was you can use shortcuts and bookmarks in a pull request to say you've initialized this variable here, you've gone and changed the value here, you can in your comment refer to the lines above. You might be able to do that in Azure DevOps, but I haven't seen it. So it's also probably something that you can spend a little bit more time actually looking at what they've done. And again, there's probably an extension for it, an extension to the extension, I don't know. But it's the type of thing that you could request because they're actually building this in now as a separate tool. So there's a team looking at it.
So those bits that you mentioned, they're only for DevOps, Git repository, not?
So no, that does exist for GitHub, but it's a different extension.
Right. Yeah.
But it exists. Yeah. So there's essentially most of the stuff you can do now, besides obviously the workout and stuff, but anything related to code, branching, and now reviews you can do with GitHub as well. What was quite interesting to see is the amount of DevOps integration now that's built into GitHub. So you can create work items and do all of that with extensions in GitHub now. So they're trying to drive that from GitHub. So the same way that you're working in code, you want to create tasks, and for the other dev teams, you want to take on the status change to say it's active or done as part of this. You can now do that from GitHub as well with extensions. So essentially driving people, well, not people, but essentially developers. When you're sitting in code, you don't necessarily want to go back to DevOps, because I think we've all seen how the status of work items can sometimes lag a little bit. Panic in the morning before stand-up to go and change all the statuses. Yeah, the whole idea is to do it in line as part of your process, so you don't end up with that. Yeah.
I suppose you know if there's something similar for VS Code as well.
Don't know about the DevOps integration for VS Code. I'd assume there's some extension for it.
A lot of functionality around shared sessions that launched in VS Code, I think slightly before VS 19, and its extensions and everything. I think all a lot of functionality will be in VS Code.
One other thing that is probably worth covering, and I do this in pretty much every talk I talk about tooling, is bookmarks. And this is something that I really, really miss from eSharper, because it's not particularly mature in VS Code, Visual Studio, sorry. And I know there are extensions again to do this, but see, I've actually forgotten. I think it's Control-K. Yep, Control-K, Control-K. So Control-K, I've created a bookmark. Go into that, working in the code, want to go back to where it was, Control-K-P, takes me back to the bookmark. That alone will increase your productivity by a substantial amount. And not having to take your hands off the keyboard to navigate between classes is quite.
And you can give names to the bookmarks as well, and then you see the list of all the bookmarks.
Okay, so that's something that, again, because of ReSharper, they're numbered. So you can use like Control 1 to 5, and then a Control Shift to go to them. So I'm used to working with that. I'm not particularly used to this.
Is it Control B, W?
Sorry?
Control B, Control W? Is that shown here? The bookmarks?
No, I'm a little building. Yeah, but it might just be because I'm using the ReSharper. Well, then it's essentially then TLJ.
You get from the list. The book, there's a bookmarks window, right? So
Yeah, it would be here if.
you done.
Yeah.
Global search. Global search,
Yeah. No, but normally it's there. Bookmark and documents. No. I don't know. I haven't seen that in Visual Studio. That's actually quite interesting.
No, it's from 2017 or 15 even.
I've only seen the basic. I've never seen anything about naming them. And kind of while we've been talking, while I've been talking, I remember a couple of other things that are probably worth demoing. A new feature that's really cool, if you rely on your debugger, is, let's just have a look here. If I put down a breakpoint, I don't know, yeah. I'm actually going to run the demo code. Not a big thing, but this is also something that I'd like to do in another talk around debugging, because there's a lot of stuff that was built into previous versions of Visual Studio around debugging that people don't leverage. So an interesting thing now is the debugger, while debugging, you can see these little run to point, so you can actually run to the end of a method and it stops. You don't have to put a bookmark there. And the amount of time I've seen people trying to put a bookmark on the end of a brace or something, or like put it on the signature, and then they run it and it skips right over that method, is a bit frustrating. So you can run directly to braces now. So it's a non-code pointer, which is actually quite interesting if you think about what it's doing. But yeah, you can run to the ends of methods. What's also quite cool is the locals window has now got a search that can search depth of the tree. So if I'm looking here at kind of what we have, if I look into the HTTP context, request. So if I look for the request object, so it'll find every time request is mentioned within my debug. So that's really useful if you're working with like quite a complex data object and you're looking for a particular field. You can stop, just search for that field, get the value. One thing which I wanted to demo, which I can't, is you can break when value changes now in C#, but only from .NET Core 3. So this is something that you can do in C++, which is really useful, but because it's putting a watch in the memory space. So I can't demo it because, interestingly enough, when I installed the update for VS 2019, my ability to enable preview features disappeared. So that's now gone from the options. So as of today, I haven't been able to use .NET Core inside Visual Studio, only in the CLI. It's all installed, all running. But yeah, in .NET Core 3, you can add watches to specific values. So if you've got an object, or if you've got a scenario where your code is, for whatever reason, are putting a really strange value on a number, say you've got like a total on an object, and by the end of the execution of your code, that's all of a sudden shifted, and you're debugging, and it looks right, then when it goes to the UI, it's wrong. You can put a watch on when that value changes, and just let the code run, and it'll stop, because something's invoked that a method to change that, or directly access the field and change it. So that's quite useful. Again, it exists, can't demo it, but it exists. It's useful. Yeah. One thing for Tom is, let me just move here. This might not exist now, but the refactor, you can move to namespace. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.